All right, welcome APUSH students to your Unit 2 test study review. Let's jump right into it. Let's talk just a little bit about women in New England. Understand that in the New England colonies that women are certainly second class. They're not going to hold any public positions. However, one area that they do have gains over the men is that they begin to constitute the majority of the population in congregations, meaning that they went to church more than the guys did. So there is that as far as ladies go. You also saw an evolution of slavery in America. You need to understand how that worked. You know, what started off with the Spanish enslaving Native Americans and encomiendas, uh, evolved into the use of indentured servants in Jamestown. And then, of course, that they have to, as the supply of indentured servants falls, they're going to turn to African slavery to replace that labor. Another topic, Protestant evangelicalism. This emerges during the First Great Awakening in the 1740s, this massive religious movement that swept through the Americas that was imported from Great Britain. It came over with people coming to America. You see the birth of a lot of Protestant denominations during the Great Awakening. You had these big revivals with tens and sometimes 20,000 people. You see that the style of preaching changes. It's more energetic and putting on a show rather than simply reading from notes up in front of a class. So that definitely changes. It sort of unified America, it anglicized it, made it more English, if you will. Now, not everybody's getting along with the people in the colonies. Anne Hutchinson and both Roger Williams are banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony for certain, different reasons. But both of them because they dissented against the civil and religious authorities of their colonies. They simply disagreed with the powers that be. Roger Williams didn't like how the Indians were being treated. He hated the fact that there was no religious freedom there in Massachusetts, and that's going to be enough to get him banished. And not long after, Anne Hutchinson would follow because she challenged the authorities of the ministers and the civil authorities there. She was sort of preaching at home to friends of hers. She was very charismatic and whatnot. So they're gonna give her the boot as well because she was challenging their authority. Now there's a lot of different types of colonies, and you need to know the three types of colonies that constituted the 13 colonies. There you had joint stock colonies such as Jamestown, where you had a group of investors or businessmen get together and share the cost of founding a colony, which was very expensive and could be dangerous as far as money goes. There were royal colonies that was an outreach of the king himself, and then there were proprietorships. They were colonies founded as they were gifts from the king or whatnot, such as Pennsylvania. Now, the first of these colonies that was successful was Jamestown in 1607. They, in the beginning, they really struggled tremendously. They, out of the original 500 plus settlers, only about 32 survived. But John Smith kicks them into gear. And, when they first showed up, all they were wanting was gold, looking for golden riches like the Spanish got. There wasn't much of that going on in the Chesapeake region. So he made them turn to agriculture, and it helped them survive until John Rolfe comes along later on. And John Rolfe moves them towards the cultivation of tobacco as a cash crop. And that's really when the colony starts beginning to flourish, is with tobacco. Jamestown is going to typically have poor Indian relations. They don't get along very well with the natives around them. The Indians certainly view them as an invasive species. Another group that came over to America was the Pilgrims, who came over. Pilgrims were separatists. They thought that the English church was corrupt and broken, and they needed to break apart from it. Versus Puritans, who settled in Massachusetts Bay. They were non-separatist. They thought that the Anglican Church had problems but could be reformed from within. But on the Mayflower, you had roughly 100 people, but about two-thirds of them weren't even pilgrims. The pilgrims needed the extra people to kind of fill the slots, if you will. Well, on the long boat ride over, they don't want to be controlled by the minority, which is the pilgrims. And so they forced the pilgrims to sign the Mayflower Compact, which would basically set up a government when they got to their colony, when they founded Plymouth which was the name of their colony, and it would found a sort of a democratic government, a House of Burgesses and stuff like that, so that those people weren't dominated by the Pilgrims. All of this is existing within something called mercantilism, which was the favored economic theory of the day for Europe, especially England. In mercantilism, the basic idea was that you sell more than you buy, and that's going to come into play heavily with colonists with things like the Navigation Acts. And, Navigation Acts were a part of mercantilism, and you see it as the kind of the first limitation of colonial trading rights. England doesn't like the fact that colonists are trading with their rivals, such as the Dutch and French. And so they're trying to rig the game in their favor so that they are making most of the money. The colonists are going to resent that, of course, to some degree or another. But the English are going to pass it nonetheless. Now, going back to the Puritans and Massachusetts Bay Colony, the idea behind that colony with Jamestown, the idea was to make money. They're coming over here to make money. Massachusetts Bay was more of a religious refuge. The Puritans under John Winthrop, who had this idea of a city upon a hill, he wanted to create a model religious community. And it's a society based upon hard work and following the rules, basically. There's with very strict punishments for people who don't. Now, another religious group that came to the Americas was the Quakers, and they're an interesting group. Pennsylvania is a proprietorship. William Penn's father was owed money by the king, so the king decided to pay it off by giving William Penn's son, William Penn Jr., a colony. Quakers were very troublesome for several different reasons. They were not liked at all in England. Most of this was, because they wouldn't pay taxes. They were pacifists. They refused to be in any of England's wars, and England had plenty. They believed in freedom of worship. They opposed slavery, and they had a lot more equality for women than other groups did. And so they were definitely seen as weird and as outcast. But they are going to be pretty successful early on, especially because William Penn writes a letter to the natives in the area that he's found in his colony and tells them he's not like the rest, and they want to set up good relations with Indians. They'll keep those good relations with Indians until the Quakers get outnumbered. Other people begin coming to Pennsylvania who aren't Quakers and don't view the world as Quakers do, and then you'll start seeing issues with Indians at that time. Remember back to the Stono Rebellion, which happened in South Carolina. The slaves there were kind of egged on by the Spanish, who had a presence in Florida to the south of South Carolina. And those slaves thought that if they could make it to Spain, that they would be freed. And that's sort of a way of Spain to disrupt England. This is a strike at England, if you will. All right. There's going to be quite a few questions over those topics. So, go into good detail on them. Women's role in the early colonies, you should know that. The evolution of slavery, Protestant evangelicalism, Hutchinson and Roger Williams, the types of colonies, the story of Jamestown, the Mayflower Compact, mercantilism, Navigation Acts, the Puritans, the Quakers, Stono Rebellion, and the Great Awakening. Those are your topics. And you're going to have 49 questions that cover those topics. So hopefully this helps you out. I think it will. You're going to want to listen to this probably a couple times, but most importantly, you're going to write stuff down and see it visually to go along with hearing it. Okay, guys, if you have any questions, let me know, and good luck on your test.